And so everyone, honored to introduce Philippe Andre. And Philippe is the U.S. brand ambassador for Charles Heidsieck. We're going to be talking about first Charles Heidsieck and giving you some background about what it is that makes their champagnes unique and why we encourage you to try them to the extent you haven't already. And after that, we're going to be tasting through both the Rosé Reserve and also the Blanc de Blanc, which I'm excited to try for the first time, since I think you were in Dallas. You didn't have that one with you, so.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited for you to check it out. We're really proud of it. So yeah, thank you again for having me on. We're gonna get down to the law and the judgment here of champagne. So thanks for having me on here. And you guys will be the judge and jury here of what we discuss. So really proud to bring the wines, obviously, to Dallas earlier this year. Can't wait to come back. You guys welcomed me so richly. I mean, it was such an awesome event. Even though it was short and sweet, I had a fun-packed day and night, so I can't wait to come back and see you guys in person.
Excellent. No, it was a very fun night for sure, and we're certainly happy you could join us. So, and today we're also going to be getting into some detail about food pairings with champagne, and not only talking about general food pairings with champagne, but pairings with Blanc de Blanc and Rosé Champagne in particular. So we'll be getting really into the weeds and hopefully giving you some pretty good insights on pairings. So with that, I think, Philippe, if you could maybe introduce yourself to those who don't already know you and explain what it is that you do as a brand ambassador.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to talk some bubbles, and more importantly, we're going to talk champagne from Charles Heidsieck. So I get the opportunity to manage our business for the house here in the U.S. We're a very small, passionate group of folks that represent this historic house around the world. I have the honor of being the one here in the U.S. So I have an outstanding importer partner, but I am the only employee of the winery here in the U.S. So there's a lot of territory to cover, so I'm pulled in many directions. So as I mentioned, I can't wait to come back to Dallas when the time comes and spend some more time with you guys. But so essentially, we're in about 44 different states. And we do about 5,000 cases annually of Charles here in the U.S., which is about I want to say around 6 or 7% of our annual sales for the winery. Most of the wine actually is sold in France. So we're growing our business here in the U.S., and we're excited to bring back the tradition of Charles here in the U.S. as it was founded by him coming to the U.S. In 1852. So Charles was the first champagne house owner to ever come to the United States. And so obviously that's him right there, as dapper as he is, wearing the bow tie always with the cigar and top hat. So a man after my own heart, absolutely. So to be able to kind of walk in his shoes as we are relaunching the brand, and more importantly, resharing his passion and commitment to excellence in the vineyard and in the cellar here in the U.S. It's been incredible. So I started with the house at the end of 18. I moved to New York from Chicago, and here we are. We're going as passionately as we can with our partners. We focus mostly with restaurants, so we have a very small retail footprint, but that's because we simply just don't have enough wine. As I mentioned, about 5,000 cases comes to the U.S. annually, and that's because it takes so long for us to make our bottles. Any given bottle of Charles that you pick up, it probably took about 2 decades to make, which is, again, pretty mind-blowing for when you think about the price point that we're at. We start around $60 a bottle, and then we go all the way up to about $250 a bottle for our core range. We do have some back vintage stuff that you'll find here and there, which I highly recommend. If you see them, grab them, because, as I mentioned, we just don't make a lot of wine, and so to be able to grab them, they're absolutely unicorns when you get to see them. So today we wanted to talk about Rosé and obviously the Blanc de Blanc. So those two wines are really a unique part of our core range of non-vintage bottlings. Our flagship is, of course, the Brut Reserve, which you'll see is about 70% of our, or 80% sometimes, our annual production bottling is the Brut Reserve. And that's simply because we age our wines individually in tanks, and then we're blending, and we do the assemblage, and then we're aging again in our chalk cellars. one of the great assets that we have to this day is Charles himself purchased about 5 miles of caves under the city of Reims. We're located about an hour outside of Paris, which is not far, and that's right in the heart, the historic heart of Champagne. Okay, brother, you're going to bed. I'm gonna lullaby you to bed to sleep tonight. Yeah, that's my boy Willem in the UK holding it down for us. Champagne Charlie Squad, how you doing, fam? What's up? Yeah. So you know, because we have these caves, we're able to age our wines with the most intimate precision. Whereas some of our neighbors are really looking to put out a large quantity, and they're bringing a representation of Champagne to the market and their house style, which we celebrate. Our house style is time. And time is really the secret sauce of Charles. A lot of people ask me, what's so different? What's so unique? And yeah, there's a few things that we do intimately for us, but they're all centered around that time. For instance, we're only using the first press when we harvest. We're actually selecting a very unique style of grape, intense clarity and precision, because we know we're going to age for a long time. We're doing every measure we can to prevent against oxygen and to really keep the juice as pristine as possible as it comes from the vineyard into the tanks and then are additionally being aged. So I know some of our wines have maybe some different numbers here, and I think I'll throw some numbers out to everybody. So with our Brut Reserve, almost half the bottle is aged wine that's of 10 years or older, average age, and there's actually some wines that are sometimes two decades older, as I said. So it takes almost 25 years to make one bottle of that, and for $69.99 on the shelf, I mean, I don't think there's any other champagne or wine that you could think of, honestly, that has that incredible amount of value and time invested into the production of it. Think about any other wine that you buy and say, you know, just ask the winemaker and say, hey, you're going to make a wine that we're going to drink in 30 years. You know, go do it, and ask every winemaker to do that. It's a very unique challenge that our chef de cave Cyril has, and it's an absolutely incredible moment to be able to watch him. And hopefully, when we have some time, when we get through this, I'd love to travel to Reims with you and be able to open the cellars for you. We are closed to the public, but I think we can rustle up a special key, and maybe we can get a few champagne lovers together and celebrate that. So
Absolutely.
Because we have those assets, we're able to create this. I mean, the identity of Charles is very unique. It's very distinct, and that's really a rarity in this day and age. There's so many different wines out there, and so to be able to have Charles be so iconically different than all the other champagne houses, and of course all the other wines out there, is it's really special. And so a great honor to be able to have these wines in our glass.
Yeah, definitely. And just to follow up on one thing you mentioned the reserve wine percentage being close to 50%. And it's my understanding that industry custom is closer to about 10%. So that's really pretty impressive when you're talking about almost 50% reserve wines compared to what other houses do.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of wine friends, somms, that ask me all these questions of, like, you know, what should I be asking of other champagne producers? And it's really funny because I think, you know, every house has a style, and we really celebrate that. We love our neighbors. We love champagne. We're wine lovers. And I think one of the first things that I was really proud to hear from our Maison director, Stephen, was, you know, we want you to celebrate Charles as part of, you know, the wine loving world. And it wasn't just about, it's only Charles, always Charles. And I think we can be greater together and inclusive, being inclusive rather than exclusive. And I think in many ways it actually helps us to put us next to some other houses that people maybe stand by. If you were to try Charles blind, I think it'd be really, really impressive. So I really encourage everyone to open 5 bottles of champagne and maybe try them all, and you learn so much about what you like and the different house styles that help you. So I think it's the rule is the first rule and law of champagne is to drink more. So I think that's the challenge. But yeah, to your point about you know, the other houses and just reserve wines is really important. But, you know, some people and some houses are looking for a different style, and that's what serves their needs. But for us, I think the other question that's really important is the age of the reserve wines. And I think that's another thing. So, you know, by law, there is no term that says a reserve wine is X amount of years old. So there's no rule about that. a reserve wine could be 1 year old. So essentially, you know, most houses will probably use 2 or 3 years of reserve wines. And, you know, again, if you're lucky, you get 5 or 6. And then some of those houses actually do a cellars system where they just put everything together and it just becomes like a, you know, part of another dosage where they add another piece of the puzzle. For us, because we're aging for so long, everything has to be aged individually. And so the individual aging process is tracked. And Cyril and his team have the pleasure of tasting those wines as they evolve in the tank. I had the opportunity to be able to go and see the tanks as well on my first visit to the winery, and it was incredible. I mean, to think about, I tasted 1996 Grand Cru Chardonnay from Auger that was in tank that still hadn't been used yet, and that's in our reserves. I mean, you know, it's crazy, and that's going to go into. You know, that's going to go into Brut Reserve. You know, as Cyril told me, I was there. He said that's going into the blend of a base vintage 18 Brut Reserve. So we're talking about our entry level wine is getting one of the highest quality wines in our cellar to really, you know, amplify and extend the spirit of Charles. And this is, again, going back to Charles himself. This guy was passionate and dedicated to his craft, and he believed in his wines and his spirit. And so we practice that to this day in the vineyard in the cellar. So,
and how is it that you're able to keep the cost down, given all the tremendous aging that's being done, and especially given the smaller production, because you can't make it up in volume either?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, we're a very small team at the winery, and myself here being the only one in the U.S. Not a lot of overhead. You don't see us on billboards. You don't see us, you know, doing much marketing. We're very much about the marketing is in the glass. You know, we put our money where your mouth is, essentially. And I think that's really the difference between us and some of the other houses. While of course a house is a brand and you're buying a brand and you're buying into that. But for me, I think when I first experienced Charles and when I was thinking about the role and when there was an opportunity for me to be a part of the team, I wanted to intimately taste the wines first. And I wanted these wines to be something that I could truly get behind on its merit and its quality first. You know, the stories of Charles are legendary and they are absolutely true and it's historic. But ultimately, the product has to be, I think, where I believe, and I'm really proud where they are, and where I know they're going. And I think that's something that our current owner, Christopher Descour, was really passionately exploring. When he bought the house in 2011 from Remy Martin, one of the greatest assets that we had was these reserve wines and our winemaking staff. So, you know, he saw it as, okay, well, the brand has, you know, maybe just some management issues and some ownership issues, but the wines have always been absolutely outstanding. And I think that's so funny when I talk with collectors and they say, oh man, I had this bottle of Champagne Charlie 79 and we had this the other day and it was so incredible. And, you know, these are not just happenstance. This is because the wines were incredible and they were made passionately from the start. So, it's really a treat to be able to see these older wines and also see the direction of Charles where it's going. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I think that,
so what are you drinking? What do you got in your glass?
Yeah, so I have I actually have 2 glasses going. So I've got the Blanc de Blanc.
I think we should start there. Okay. You want to start with the Blanc de Blanc?
Yep. Yes, that's great. So here's the Blanc de Blanc.
Perfect.
Yep.
And people ask all the time, why are your bottles so different? If you guys go to my Instagram, there's a picture of me standing in the cellar, and we call our cellar the Claire because it's literally a chalk deposit that the Romans dug out in the 200s, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we're one of the few houses that actually owns the property under the city. A lot of other houses have cellars, but ours is a little more historic, I guess you could say. And our bottle, we actually had an artist create a mold that is in the exact same representation of a hallway in our cellar. It's about 100 feet below ground, and this cellar is a network of 47 individual caves. So we pay a lot of homage and tribute to the investment that Charles made back in the day, and obviously because it's our cellar, this is our heart and soul of the winery, is our basement. Yeah.
It's so cool to tour those old cellars too and see the where all the champagnes are aged in the old bottles. And yeah, it's really fun. So
it's an absolutely historic place. If you guys ever get a chance to go to Reims, you have to. Like I said, it's really close to Paris. I mean, Paris obviously is an absolute epicenter for culture and cuisine and gastronomy and art. Reims is not far. And then if you look into the history of it, it is a classic place where the kings were crowned, and so there's a beautiful cathedral in Notre Dame there, and the history of cuisine and art also was very much founded in Reims as well, because it was a place of commerce where you had the wealthy from all over Europe meeting there and to do business, and so you had these businessmen who invested in the property and then realized that, okay, well, instead of selling textiles, which is usually what was going on, we can make wine, and fantastic wine at that. So that's really, I think, a unique place to visit. I tell a lot of friends, and I urge them to go visit Reims. It's there's also another town called Epernay, which is really close as well. Champagne is easily region to navigate, and you have really beautiful styles in each area that will really help you understand how diverse Champagne can be. As I mentioned, you try multiple Champagnes at once because there are so many different styles. There's 15,000 different Champagne producers. So that's a lot of different wine to choose from, and everyone's going to find the one that they care for, which is a lot of fun. Fun.
Yeah, I actually made that trip. I was in Paris, and then it's maybe a 45-minute train ride to Reims, and then maybe another extra 10 minutes to Epernay. Yeah,
15 minutes waiting for your car, and then once you get the car, it's a 5-minute drive to the hotel.
Yeah, exactly. And at that cathedral you mentioned, they can see the Chagall windows as well, which are pretty cool. So.
Yes, and I love it because my father's a chef, and he's a classic French chef, and he had some amazing teachers along his way during his career, and so I kind of grew up with this classic French cuisine in my life, and it's something that you're not seeing much of anymore, and a lot of modern cuisine is happening, which is really exciting, but sometimes there's something about a classic, decadent meal that is just absolutely regal, and it's something you just don't see very much. So there's quite a few restaurants in Reims that are doing outstanding meals. There's actually Domaine de Carrière, which is I think it's a 2-star Michelin hotel, and they have a 2-star Michelin restaurant as well. So that is something where you walk into that hotel and you just feel like a king, and that's Champagne.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the things I love most about dining in France is that they always have the champagne cart to start the meal. They roll the different champagne.
They know how to sell.
Up to your table, and then present you a big
the champagne cart, the cheese cart. They know how to get you. And,
then I'm wondering. I mean, one of the things I've been wondering for years is why in the heck don't they have those in the United States? I mean, I think it would be a great thing for restaurants to do, and I've been wondering that for years, and no one really gives me a good answer. But especially with restaurants being your big market, maybe we can we can change that and get some champagne carts in the United States.
I have a few in the past, in a previous life, in a previous role. I've definitely organized a few champagne carts for a few restaurants, and I think what it takes is a passionate operator that understands the sommelier, understands the opportunity that they have to really connect with their consumer and really share champagne. I think it's something that you have to really work hard as an owner operator of a restaurant to get people excited about champagne. I mean, I think everybody's always excited about champagne, but when it comes to paying for it is another problem. So, I think it's tough because you understand that we like champagne, but when you have the moment and you feel the moment, now the price doesn't seem so bad. And I think that's, again, one of the amazing assets we have is we own our property under the city. So our overhead is really low in our production. And we have an incredible product at our price point. So we really have a great opportunity to disrupt. And we like a little disruption every now and then.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So getting to the Blanc de Blanc, this is, definitely very impressive. And it's my understanding it's primarily from the 2012 vintage. It's 2012 base.
Yeah, so if you look on our back of our bottles, if you guys get a chance to grab one or see one, we put 2 dates on the back of every bottle. And the first date is the date that the bottle was entered into the cellar. So the first date tells you basically by the power of deduction, if it says it went into the cellar in 2013, the base vintage, which is primarily the majority of the bottle, was 2012. The second date is the date of disgorgement. So essentially we know how long the bottle was in the cellar on lees for secondary fermentation. So, and we do this because our transparency is the most important thing here in the sense of, we're overachievers. If the law is telling us, okay, you got to do 18 months, 2 years for a bottle, and we say, okay, well, we're going to put, we're going to put not only that, but we're going to go above and beyond because this is our heart and soul of our wine. We're going to do it. And we want to make sure that everybody knows. And the reason being is you see different base vintages as you travel. And as you go to a different wine shop, you'll see a different one. And it's so fun to revisit previous base vintages and at the same time see how they evolve. And I think the more information we can give, the consumer and the wine lover, the more information they have to go on their journey of what they love about wine, and more importantly, how they feel about Charles. And I would love to see more champagne houses do this. Most of the time, you'll just see a disgorgement date. Or it'll tell you the time it was on lees. So, the disgorgement date is great, but it doesn't tell you how much time it was on lees. And also the disgorgement date is a little subjective in a sense of, I think everyone's personal preference is to say, oh, I want the recent disgorgement. Well, that's great. But sometimes when you try a wine that's been off lees and disgorged for 10, 15, 20 years, it can be actually magical. So, the information can be a little interesting at times, and sometimes it's a little confusing. But at the end of the day, I think it's just a reference point for people to gauge as they taste along on their journey. Yeah. Yep. And actually, with the Blanc de Blanc, I'm seeing in certain markets, the base vintage was the first non-vintage year that we've done since 1949. We did a non-vintage for Pan Am Airway, and when I was at the winery, I saw the label actually that actually had the Pan Am Airway logo and decal on it. It was really fantastic to see that. But Charles is an intimate tradition with Blanc de Blanc and Chardonnay. The first vintage of Charles actually doing a Blanc de Blanc was 1906, and so quite a lot of time, and that was done by one of Charles' descendants actually. So there's a lot of history behind it, but the non-vintage Blanc de Blanc is our way to express that tradition. We do make a Blanc de Blanc vintage, which is pretty historic, and a lot of people kind of think of us intimately for that wine. It's a very unique wine, but the non-vintage is really an absolute way to express that on a regular basis. The price point there is a little bit higher than a normal non-vintage, but that's, again, our ability to select outstanding fruit, and our selection helps us really think that we have, again, a great value, I think, on our hands with that wine. So the base vintage there is 2012. Your disgorgement is 18. Is that correct?
The disgorgement is 18. Yep.
Okay. So I've actually found here in Chicago some 19 disgorgement that we recently received, and it's so interesting to try those two wines side by side. So I think for all of you Charlie fans out there, I encourage you to maybe try to hold one bottle from your case, before you get the next case, because when you get the next one, you never know. There may be a slight difference, and it's, again, really interesting to try the difference. And because it was the first base vintage, we wanted to launch in the market, and then we wanted to also hold some back in very much in the style. So you're going to see different disgorgement dates, and you'll see different base vintages as we progress through the years. But it's a really it's a fun thing. It's a joy of love of wine and winemaking, and I think that's the total package when it comes to what we're able to offer in our bottles.
Yeah. And of course, the non-vintages, even after they're in the bottle and people buy them, they still will age quite nicely in the bottle.
Absolutely.
So people don't need to drink them.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that, we often think of vintage wines as the ones that we only age. Later this year, I think, if I don't overstep my bounds here, we're hoping to release some non-vintage older base vintages from the 90s and 80s with a later release at the end of this year. So I hate to maybe overstep a little bit, but I'm excited to share that it's coming. Hopefully we get it in before the end of the year. If not, it'll be early next year. But I'm excited to see that, because I think at the end of the day, it tells a real story and tradition of the outstanding winemaking we've had for generations at the winery. I
agree, and especially when you consider this particular Blanc de Blanc, if you're talking about 75% of the 12 base. Of course, 2012 is an outstanding vintage, and then anything else that's not that outstanding vintage base is reserve wine, which is also pretty good. So that's a good combination.
Yeah, you know, because that was the first time that we've done the non-vintage, the base wines is really the star in the show. And as Cyril, our chef de cave, explained, is that with the non-vintage Brut Reserve, that is a different animal completely compared to the Blanc de Blanc and the Rosé. The Rosé may be a little bit closer to the Brut Reserve in style, but the Blanc de Blanc is a completely different animal altogether. And it's never, I don't think you'll ever see it go in the direction of the Brut Reserve as having such old, decadent reserve wine. The Blanc de Blanc is really about showing precision. And that's what's so incredible about Cyril as a winemaker, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to show you this. And each wine has its own identity and soul, and is the perfect companion for the moment. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, on the nose, I'm getting lots of, and even on the palate, it's pretty consistent, but I'm getting, you know, now that it's getting a little bit warmer, I'm getting grapefruit, certainly, and initially I certainly got a lot of brioche and toast and maybe some dried ginger, a little bit of floral aromatics and some almonds. Lots of good stuff going on.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of people asking about stemware. What stemware are you using today?
I'm actually using the Burgundy glasses. So,
okay.
So yeah, I'm a big no flute guy when it comes to champagne, and I use those for sparkling wine or sparkling water, but not so much for champagne. So
yeah, people ask all the time, how come you don't use flutes? And I think it's more of an exploratory thing. You know, I think some people would like to prefer the flute, and that's okay. I'm not going to judge anyone on how they like to drink champagne. As long as it's Charles, you can put it wherever, whatever you want to put it, and that's fine with me. But you know, for instance, my mother, she absolutely adores flutes, and she wants to see the bubbles. And I've had her try, you know, the white wine glass, the Burgundy glass. I've done it all side by side. And at the end of the day, what mom wants, mom's going to get. I'm not going to argue with her, but she does agree that the wine smells best not in a flute. So I think you know, we can learn some things from there. And I think I would challenge you guys that are listening and watching along to check it out. You know, don't be afraid to pull out another glass out of your cabinet and just pour it in two glasses, 2 sips, and just see. You know, smell the wine. And I think that's the biggest thing about Charles, specifically for us, is all these years are information. Each year is an information point that comes into the bottle and into the glass. And if you put that in a little guy, you may miss some of it. Exactly. You know, that's the way I look on it. But again, I think you try yourself and explore, and that's the beauty of wine.
Yep. Yeah. And similarly, when it comes to serving temperature, oftentimes if it's served too cold, you can mute the wine as well.
Yeah.
What is the recommended serving temperature for these wines?
Well, I like to be very inclusive here. My father loves it really cold. You know, after a long day of service, he's a chef, so he's in the kitchen. It's really hot in the kitchen. He wants a nice cold glass of champagne. Me, for instance, I like drinking it like white Burgundy. You know, I like it a little warmer personally. I want to taste a little bit of everything, and I have a little more time maybe, instead of just saying, okay, back to the next, next table, pick up, you know, and I get it. So I think it's situational. Again, I know Cyril, for instance, I mean, he loves these wines at a very higher temperature than probably most people would. And for me, I think when you're serving guests, I would serve it a little bit colder than normal, just and give them the option to choose if they want it to warm up. You know, you're talking with friends around a table, it's going to sit there, it's going to warm up, it's okay. But I would definitely say, like, you know, completely chilled in the fridge at 40 degrees is too cold. It's not fair. You're not giving the wine a chance to really to shine. But, you know, it's summertime, so you got to start somewhere, and it's going to warm up. Even with a nice ice bucket, you're gonna have to definitely pay attention to it. But it's also part of the fun is to watch it evolve. You know, is it refreshing right away? That first sip is very unique, and then it changes. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in terms of food pairings with Blanc de Blanc, it's one of my favorite in terms of pairing it with food. It's certainly great on its own as well. But for example, with sushi, anytime I go to a sushi restaurant, I immediately look for the Blanc de Blanc on the list, because I think with seafood and sushi in particular, it's absolutely phenomenal.
Absolutely, and oysters as well. Oysters, the salinity there, it's such a great compliment, you know. And but I'm a firm believer in having some fun with it. So, you know, I think the Blanc de Blanc, because it is so mineral and direct, you can really try some unique things. Thai food is a lot of fun. You know, of course, being respectful to spice, it's always fun. Those exotic notes, I think, really bring out you know, some of the citrus notes that are in that wine, and the roundness too. I mean, it's a pretty rich Blanc de Blanc, non-vintage, in my opinion.
Yep.
So you know, it's got some guts and some power, and that's really you know, that's the house style coming through too, and that's I think it's been beautifully crafted. Cyril's got a great management of winemaking style, but also being respectful for what, you know, what a Charles wine should be like.
Exactly. Yeah. And another one of my favorite pairings would be like a lobster mac and cheese with it, because you know it has that acidity to cut through the richness, and it's
shave a little truffle on top, and you're good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, now we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Well, should we move on to the rosé? Yeah,
you got the rosé ready?
I do. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm wearing my rosé robe today. I hope you guys don't mind.
Yeah, no, I came prepared.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so this is the rosé.
Yes. So our non-vintage rosé, and you're based in Dallas. Our retail partner there has some outstanding wine still on the shelf at Pogo's. You can check it out. That is the 2008 base vintage rosé. So that's actually the 5th time that we've made a non-vintage rosé. When you think about how long it takes to make these wines, you know, we don't make them every year. And so that base vintage, the oldest wine in there goes back to 1999. So the reserve portion of that is again a smaller portion than the Brut reserve, but the identity there is to really showcase the style of rosé. So higher percentage of base vintage, and lower percentage of reserve wine, and also a little bit younger average age on the reserve wine. So, but that's a stunner, man. It's decadent. It's rich. I mean, I get a lot of black cherry on it. I'm actually drinking the 12 base vintage, which is the one that came after it.
Okay.
So the 12 is really an absolutely, like you said, an outstanding vintage. But the 08s, man, you should look at the color of that. It's sexy. It's really sexy.
Yeah, it's actually got kind of an orange hue to it.
Yep. And Cyril was saying it's like a copper color, and I said, no, Cyril, this is rose gold. This is rose gold.
Yeah, I like that.
Let me get that going here. Let's get that going. Yeah,
rose gold.
But again, that's the age. That's the age in the tank, and that's also the age on lees. And when was your bottle disgorged? Was it the 17 disgorgement, or was it
the 17 disgorgement? Yep.
17 disgorgement. So what's interesting is that 08 base 17 disgorgement, I actually have the 12 base 17 disgorgement. So you see that, you know, we're disgorging on not necessarily on demand, but when the wines are ready, and also as we are replenishing our stocks to the US. And because we have such a small volume that comes here, you know, we're able to put a new container on the boat and get it here. So it's a cool way to kind of, again, just share the mystery and also the passion and dedication to these wines. So obviously your wine with incredible much more time on these, you're seeing this texture. And I think that's a lot of times people think of it's really yeasty, it's really brioche from the time on these. And I think that is partially true, but most of it is the texture, in my opinion. The fuzziness, the really small bubble, that's what you get from the extra long time on these. I think the brioche and the yeast comes out at the time after disgorgement. Really, it really starts to come out during the aging process after disgorgement. And a lot of people also sometimes will ask, "Hey, you know, how much oak do you guys use?" And we actually use no oak on these wines. Cyril is experimenting with some oak right now, but these wines that we're tasting had no oak on them. They're all stainless steel, and because again, we're trying to make a wine that's built to last for 20 plus years, and at the same time be really approachable when we do release it. So we're asking these individual wines to stand the test of time in the tank, and then again in the bottle. So it's a lot. These are the Olympic medal winning grapes of Champagne.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
They're long distance runners.
Yeah, and it looks like for this one the breakdown is 80% 2008 base and then 20% reserve wine.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So the reserve wine there, like I said, it goes back to 99 is the oldest reserve wine, but most of it is younger, and so it's hard, obviously, to put all the information on the back label. So we do as much as we can to be transparent, but it's so fun to see how these wines evolve, and you also look to the vintages that we released in the past, particularly those are the years that you'll see reserve wines that were held back. Also, like for instance, we didn't make a 2002. And so 2002 was a year that was absolutely outstanding, but we needed to invest in our reserve tanks. And that's why you don't see a vintage 2002 of Charles. So we did 2000 vintage Brut, 1999 Rosé. Then we did '05 Brut, '06 Brut, and we're just now releasing the '08 Brut. And in Europe, we just released the 2012 Brut. So that's the timetable and timeline for Charles. I believe 15 maybe in the cards down the road.
Okay.
Also an outstanding vintage, and actually Cyril's first year. So I think we'll see a 15 in a few years, when it's ready. But for us, vintage at Charles, it takes us, we're talking 9-10 years minimum on these before we release it. So we're just now releasing the 8. It was such a fantastic year that we held it back for an additional 2 years than we normally would. For instance, the '06 was disgorged in 18, and the '08 was disgorged in 19. So again, we're really tasting the wines. And again, that's the job that Cyril has to do, is to taste these wines, determine when they're ready, and to make that decision. But he's backed by our ownership to make that call, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, and just in terms, I don't think we've talked about the price point for the Rosé Reserve yet, but especially if you can find one with the 2008 base, it's really a very good value, because this was not that much more than the price you quoted for the Brut Reserve.
Yeah, we're usually about $15 to $20, in that price range difference between the Brut Reserve. And again, we're talking about an extra step. So for us, a lot of people ask, how is it rosé? Is it because we're using, we're blending the skin color? And no. So we're making a separate wine specifically from a separate vineyard site. We're making fermentation in barrel, just like we would if it was a Burgundy. So it's a Pinot Noir that's blended in. So this is the assemblage method. And we're doing that again because we need the wines to be absolutely pristine when they go into the bottle to withstand the test of time. So that's how we do it. Cyril is not looking for a particular color. Actually, if you notice, our bottles are green. So that means go. Green means go. Every time you see a bottle of Charles, you open the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for this particular blend, it looks like there was 5 to 6% of still red wine. Is that pretty customary, or does that vary from disgorgement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we taste through. I mean, Cyril is tasting a varying degree of that percentage every year when he decides to make the rosé blend. So we'll see it change. We actually have our vintage rosé, for instance, will usually have a little bit higher proportion of still red wine, and that's again to show off the vintage. We want to really include all the information we can. But you'll see it'll be really close to 5%, 6%. Probably on the non-vintages going forward as well. And again, the color is not the importance. It's really the texture, the aromatics, and the complexity that we gain from that still wine. A lot of people say, well, why is it more expensive if it's just a color? Well, smell that wine next to the Brut Reserve and tell me that there is the same wine. There's no comparison. It's a completely different experience. I absolutely adore Rosé Champagne. I absolutely adore old Rosé Champagne. So when I saw these wines and you pour them from the glass, I get so excited. Some of my most famous or favorite experiences with Champagne in particular have been older rosé bottles that you just are like, wow, this is a whole nother gear that some wines could never offer. And I think that's the same thing about Blanc de Blanc. Blanc de Blanc is a whole different animal as well, and can be so exciting when you see it with age.
Oh, I agree. And in fact, especially if they have a higher percentage of still red wine, some of them almost have a nose of Burgundy after they get really old.
Yes.
If you were blinding it, literally with a blindfold on, and you couldn't see it, you might even think it was a Burgundy rather than a Champagne.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot of fun to do that. I absolutely adore Burgundy. I think everyone at the winery does too. So I think we can argue about who does a better representation of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And we probably would stay up all night discussing that. I'd probably have a couple cigars, but we really love what they're able to do with their terroir. And we love the differences that we're able to do with our terroir. And one of the cool things about that is that our chef de cave has started a program where he's making still wines from each individual vineyard, so that you can really express the purity of Champagne and all the different characteristics that we have access to us. I mean, our Brut Reserve, for instance, is 60 different wines usually when he does the final blend. The Rosette, 50 different wines. So you're talking about a real masterpiece that's put together. But what it really takes is someone to understand each individual wine and how it's going to act as it progresses. And that's something I haven't really seen in any other wine region other than cognac, for instance. You know, these and they talk about these noses, the masters, like the perfume companies too. Those guys that create cologne and fragrances. I mean, it's really an incredible thing to watch. And I've had the opportunity to sit down with Cyril and see him do his work. And it's like watching an artist. You know, you say it makes sense, but at the same time, you're like, I try. He challenged me to do it, and let's just say I need a couple more tries at it. So I can't wait to get back there and give him a run for his money. But that's really the special secret. Yeah.
Excellent. How big is the team that does the tastings to determine the blends for the various champagnes?
Yeah, you know, it's about 6 or 7. And again, they're tasting regularly. So this is happening a lot to also check in on the reserve wines. But the final blend, actually, Cyril was with me in New York right before everything happened in March. And thankfully, we were able to get him back to the winery because he hadn't finished all the final blends yet. So we really needed to get him out of town safely. And thankfully, we did. So we're all good. And he was happy to report that 19 base vintage is going to be really special. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and in terms of descriptors for this one, like you mentioned, I am getting a lot of the toast and the brioche and the bready notes, which I really do enjoy. But I'm also getting some berries and then also even a little bit of orange rind, which I sometimes get in, sometimes even get that from Sonoma Coast Pinot. I'll get a little bit of an orange rind note, but I'm also getting a little bit of it on this, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool, and I have one 08 base vintage left, so I'm sorry I didn't open it because I'm holding on to that. But tasting my 12, which is a very tropical vintage. 08 I think is a ton of structure and precision. 08 much more tropical. This is still very primary on my end, and I think it's going to be really cool to see how they evolve. I mean, you can even see on the color. I'm a little bit lighter shade than you are.
Oh, yeah.
So it's fun to see how they go, and like for me, it's like that black cherry cola I think I get with the 08 that is so unique. It has this kind of dark and mysterious kind of texture as well that is a real treat. It's a real treat. I'm glad we were able to find that for you.
Absolutely, no, that worked out very well, and it's actually nice though that you have different disgorgement. Can talk about that as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, again, people are passionate about wine, and we should help empower them to continue that passion. And by putting all the information on there, we can really dive into it and what they really love about champagne and wine in general. And we always have the conversation of, do you like Burgundy? Yeah. Well, of course I do. But they say, well, what kind of Burgundy do you like? Well, I like 80s Corton Charlemagne. That's just me. That's not everybody. I'm not saying everybody's going to like that, but that's just me. I like to push the envelope a little bit when it comes to the aging potential of wines, and I like to find that cross section. And usually, sometimes it can go really, really wrong, but when it's right, man, it is a magical experience.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the thing I struggled with most about Burgundy is certainly in terms of investing that. It's hit or miss and it's inconsistent. You either kind of hit the jackpot or you can have a few duds in there too. And I kind of
it's very humbling, very humbling experience for sure. I can't express. I poured more Burgundy down the drain than any other region of the world, but at the same time, I still buy it. I keep coming back to it, and for me, bubbles is that dark night, that blue chip, that champagne is so incredibly consistent, and because of the layers that we go through to make our wine, especially the way we do it, Charles, you can really be rest assured that the quality is going to be top notch every time you pull the cork. And when it comes to style of effervescence and age, that's up to you to determine. If you like that, then wait on them. If you like them fresher and vibrant, then go for it. And that ability to have that decision by the drinker is so important for us. So
yeah. One interesting thing that comes to mind based on your comments is that I know in terms of corked bottles, when you're talking about some red wines, for example, and some white wines, the average is maybe 5%. They say. like at least 5% could be corked. But I think I can only recall maybe two bottles of champagne in my entire life that have been corked, and that's way less than 5%. So that's probably less than 1%.
It happens. It happens for sure. You know, we thankfully, champagne, the way it's made, is a very meticulous process, and attention to detail has to be taken. So the production sites usually of the houses are absolutely squeaky clean. I mean, they're incredible. Their meticulous care and attention goes into it. So, you know, that's one deterrent of TCA, is that bacterial growth, right? And once it's in your cellar, it's really hard to get rid of, and it's not something to easily avoid either. So, you know, it's something for us, having an older site, an older production site, it's a challenge. But for us, our chef de cave has transitioned over to the DM cork. So it's the basically it's a pressure a design cork that is not synthetic. It's actually natural, but it's mulched and then screened with UV to basically cleanse it from any type of bacterial infection. So we're using these corks going forward, and you'll see some original corks on our older bottlings, but we're moving forward with that. So you'll see a lot of our non-vintage wines will have that now. Yeah,
excellent. And now getting on to the pairings. What are some of your favorite pairings with rosé champagne?
With the rosé, I have to say, I said it yesterday. I think fried chicken. Fried chicken is an outstanding pairing. So I love it. I think it's something that it brings people together. It's warm. It's comfort food, and at the same time, it's got that perfect balance of umami to the richness and decadence on the wine. If you wanted to class it up, I'm going to say let's go with a decadent fish, you know, like a Scottish salmon that's baked, you know, something like that. Or I would even go as something richer, like a pork chop or pork loin. I think the sauce is really the determining factor if it pairs best. But you can even go with steak. And I love doing like our vintage rosé, which has a higher proportion of still red wine in it. Showing that with a nice steak is an incredible experience. And again, I think if your sauce is not too aggressive, it's going to be a fun experience. While you're grilling, it also doesn't taste bad while you're drinking while you're grilling either. Yeah. Keeps you refreshed.
No, I completely agree. And yeah, I've oftentimes had meals where I've done nothing but champagne the whole way through, and then we'll do the rosé champagne with the entree. And you're right, if you have a rosé that's lighter and in still red, kind of like this one, that would go perfectly even with like pork or poultry, for example. Mm-hmm. But then if you do one that has a higher percentage, it would even stand up to the red meats.
Yeah, absolutely. Lamb is another one. Again, it's I think, you know, my time, I spent about 10 years on the floor in fine dining as a sommelier, and a lot of times people would ask me, say, hey, you know, can you, and we're primarily a seafood restaurant too. So pretty much fish is the main course for everybody. And people would say, hey, I want to do the wine pairings for 7 courses, but I don't drink white wine. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, do I tell them to leave, or do I tell them to, you know, I'm going to make it happen? So it challenged me definitely to think outside the box of pairings, and more importantly, understand that when you have really great wine, it's going to work well. I think 90% of the time it's going to work just fine. Obviously, your sauce is the biggest component that you have to think about. The protein, maybe not so much. But if you're doing a sauce like my father would do at our restaurant, you know, you have to really be careful with that. But at the same time, the customer, if they're telling you they want this, I mean, Napa Cab with halibut and an olive sauce, you know, maybe not the best pairing, but hey, if they want it and it's going to be, you know, old something cool, then I'm pouring. I'm doing it. You know, let's do it. Let's check it out and let's have fun. And I think that's really the end of the day. Is have fun with it. You know.
Yeah. No, that's right. Something else that I've tried in the past. I know a lot of people were touting the Pinot Noir and truffle fries before, but rosé champagne with truffle fries is pretty outstanding as well. So.
Truffle fries, yes. I mean, caviar is dangerous as well. I actually just the other day recreated a dish that I had at Joel Robuchon a few years ago in Paris, and it was basically the ratio of caviar to pasta. It was basically simple butter pasta. The ratio has to be pretty much the same. So it's equal parts pasta and caviar, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous pairing, but that is a lot of fun, and I really loved enjoying pairing rosé with caviar. It's something that a lot of people don't think of. You think of usually a Blanc de Blanc or a Brut, and I think rosé with a really creamy, decadent caviar is a fun way to show how they can work, and it's an interesting challenge to see yourself. So
yeah, I'm one of those people. I usually do the Blanc de Blanc, so I'll have to try it with the rosé next time. So
yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
So, and then what about other, not necessarily with the rosé or the Blanc de Blanc, but what are some of your other champagne food pairings that you like best? Like maybe with the Reserve or with some of the vintage Brut, for example.
Yeah, the vintage is so decadent. So right now we're on to 2008, as I mentioned. We still have some 06 that you'll find in retail, and actually there's probably some 05 that's tucked away as well. So real quickly, I'll go through those vintages. 05 is really muscular, and I think it's decadent in its own right in the sense of I think it's ready to drink right now, and it's really it's showing secondary notes of the aging there. So that was disgorged in 17 on the 05, so you're seeing some time, obviously, but then the 06 is a very much more tropical, luscious style vintage. So while it's raw, rich and decadent, it's just a completely different animal. Whereas the 05, I think, is just more, it's a little more blunt. I think blunt force. I think of that when I taste that wine, and it's a complete beast. And the 06 is really sexy. It's luscious, voluptuous, and then the 8 is a scalpel, man. It's precise. It's powerful. The layers are there. It's honestly, it's a baby right now. It's infant, and we're gonna see as it evolves. But trying those wines and then trying them next to like the non-vintage Brut Reserve is so hilarious. The vintage wines, the nose on them absolutely erupts out of the glass. And this is really, in my opinion, why you use a Burgundy glass, why you use a white wine glass, because in a flute, you would lose a lot of that detail. Now, the Brut Reserve, because it is blended, because we have all these different dynamics in the wines, it's no slouch, of course. But that is really a much more of an aperitif or an introductory experience, whereas the vintage becomes the next level. So the pairings, I would say, is your Brut Reserve is going to be your appetizers, your charcuteries, your cheese plate, your salad. Of course, you can ask it to be a lot. You know, you could put it with your fish if you want it with your main course, absolutely. But your more decadent, powerful dishes will be much more rewarded with a vintage wine in that realm. And so it's a fun kind of juxtaposition. Or the vintage, because it is so much on its own, you almost don't want to eat anything with it either. So it's one of those two things where I think it can either become the dish, or it can play along with something that is really rich and decadent. So our vintage wines are really heavily based on Pinot Noir. For instance, we're about 60% Pinot Noir, and the rest is Chardonnay. We're not using Meunier in our vintage wines, and that's, again, because we're asking them to age so long on these. And we just find that Meunier for us is best used as a part of our base vintage, which is always about a third of our base vintage wines, aside from our Blanc de Blanc, of course. But there is a wine that we made many years ago, which will return. I'm very excited to announce. Champagne Charlie will return. I haven't been able to pry the vintage out of Cyril's hands yet, but he made it, so I'm sure it's a very recent vintage. And hopefully, when it is ready, he's shared with me that Meunier is in that blend. So that'll be a vintage Charles, again in the tradition of the old vintages of Champagne Charlie, that will have Meunier in it. So I'm excited to see that tradition continue.
Excellent. And for those who don't know, maybe you could just explain what Champagne Charlie is. It's my understanding that there's only been about 5 vintages and none since, what, 1985 or so?
Yeah, 85 was the last vintage. So Champagne Charlie was a cuvee that was made in tribute to our founder, Champagne Charlie himself, Charles Heidsieck. People got to see him at parties when he was going and traveling through the U.S. He would bring champagne to the parties, and Heidsieck being kind of a bit of a tough name to explain or to pronounce, Champagne Charlie became his name, and that became the lore of this guy coming to parties, bringing cases, and you know, that's the spirit of Charles and the spirit of Champagne. Yeah.
Excellent. And what about the Blanc de Millionaire? I know is another one we haven't talked too much about.
Yeah, Blanc de Millionaire. Yeah, Blanc de Millionaire is our vintage Blanc de Blanc. So we've made that wine 6 times. The current vintage is 2004 here. We're going to be releasing 2006 very soon. The first vintage of Blanc de Millionaire was 83. So this is essentially something we were very particular when we make it. It's a small selection of grapes that were coming from 5 vineyards in the Côte de Blanc that literally the stars have to align when that's made. And we're really using this as a way to highlight our cellar and our Créer. So Blanc de Millionaire, which essentially means the wine of the millennia, our cellar being of many years of age, millennia in creation and history. And so this is where the identity of this wine came. And it was really created by our legendary winemaker Daniel Thibault, and that was really his wine and his time to really say, hey, look at what we were able to do with this. So really unique wine and an incredible experience and value for where it is. You're going to probably find it around 220, 250-ish, but you put it next to another house that has a similar type of vintage Blanc de Blanc that's maybe double or triple the price. I think it's a fun wine to show. Yeah.
No question for sure. And one of the things that I really like to do, speaking of that, is you could get maybe 3 or 4 friends together, each put 1 bottle in, and put the bags over them with the numbers on them, and clear them out, and you could have a fun night trying to figure out which one you like best, and that way you wouldn't be influenced by the labels at all.
Oh yeah, I'm calling all challengers. Let's do it. Let's go. Everybody get together and let's do it. I'm ready. Let's go. Blanc de Millionaire versus the world. Let's do it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, and the other thing that we're almost running out of time here, and I know we get cut off after an hour, so we might have the countdown coming up in the next couple minutes. But one of the things that surprises me is, I guess I've been drinking so much champagne for so long that I don't really consider it to be just a celebratory drink, even though it's great for that as well. But if someone will ask me, for example, what I drank last weekend, and I'll tell them, then of course champagne will be part of what I drank, and then they'll say, "Oh, what were you celebrating?" And that still surprises me. But there's still kind of a pervasive attitude that champagne is just for celebrations rather than something to drink more frequently. Is that still something that you encounter as well? And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, we're unfortunately we're the curse of that marketing strategy, which was very effective. You see a tray of flutes at a wedding or a big ball or gala, and the flutes really were designed to show off the bubbles, but really to fit on a tray. You can put 100 flutes on a tray versus 20 burgundy glasses. There's a big difference, right? But the celebration is important. I think it's you open a bottle of champagne and it becomes a celebration of life. And I think we should all reflect and think about that on a daily basis with a bottle of champagne. But no, I think it comes down to, wine lovers. And I challenge wine lovers around the world to think of champagne as a wine, first and foremost. And I tell people all the time, they're like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, I sell wine." I go, "Where from?" "Oh, Champagne." They're like, "Oh, you sell champagne?" I go, "Yeah, we make wine from the region of Champagne. We're not, there's nothing else. it's not some secret, something else. And we are a wine. We're a sparkling wine at that from the region of Champagne. And I think we need to be a little more thoughtful in our approach of sharing champagne and sharing. We have an incredible value proposition here. When you think about Burgundy, a Bourgogne Rouge, $50, $60 a bottle for entry-level Pinot Noir that's too young to drink, and it may be inconsistent at the moment. You open a bottle of non-vintage Charles for the same price. I mean, the experience, in my opinion, right now is really difficult to justify the quality there. But I think it's fun to put them together, and it's fun to look at all different types of wines around the world. But I think you're right. I think we need to drink more champagne.
Yeah, for sure. And there's not a week that goes by where I don't open at least 1 or 2 bottles. So I totally agree with that. And another good use for it is when I'm opening a red wine and it's not ready to go yet, I'll drink the champagne while I'm decanting the red. And that seems to work well too. So
yes, absolutely.
Well, it looks like we had our 1-minute warning. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. Time goes fast, but it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. So what's the judgment here on the verdict? What do we got? What do we got on the Charles?
I love both of them. So the Blanc de Blanc was incredible. I was glad to get to try it, and I certainly appreciate that. And that was a great opportunity. And the Rosé Reserve was one of my favorites from the first time around. So always nice to revisit that. And yeah,
awesome,
very good stuff. So thank you so much.
Hey, well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to see you in Dallas and wherever the travels take us. And of course, we all got to get together in Ross when we can. So thanks again for having me, and thank you for your passion for wine and champagne.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.